Hey everyone, welcome to week 28. This is day 5. This is our final day of You're Not Supposed To week, or are you? This is where we're trying to work on things that are supposed to be wrong. They're supposed to be affecting your painting in some way, and you're not supposed to do them. Like, there's a better way of doing this. This week, what we're trying to do is work on surfaces that have no priming. They are raw. And I'm using paper just because I absolutely love painting on paper. And I think the results in this week, I can tell you, from the bottom of my heart, this is actually how I would love to paint. This is closer to the idea of painting that I have, inside and how I see my painting. This is more faithful to what I would want my painting to be like, to feel like, to look like, than anything else I've done before. So, what do you do then? If this is wrong, what are you supposed to do? Not do it? But if it's close to what you are as a painter, what are you supposed to do? Like say, no, I'm sorry, I'm going to deny myself the possibility of doing this just because the painting is probably going to be affected. The object of painting is probably going to be affected through time, through the passage of time, far more than if we did things properly. So what do we do there? My stance on this is that we just paint however we paint, and if it gets us closer to what we want, we should do that. We really should do that and not care about what's going to happen to the painting in 20 years or 50 years. So that has been this week. I think it's going to be a cool week that we can repeat. Maybe this is going to be the first repeat week. And next week, we can do something else that's wrong, ? And we can do another week of You're Not Supposed To and see how that goes. But thank you guys for hanging out this week. And we'll see you guys next week. Thank you. Bye. Okay, let's get started. This is our 5th day on our ongoing You're Not Supposed To week, where we've been working on unprimed paper. A lot of questions about the paper. I've already mentioned this before, but I'll mention it very quickly. This is a Moleskine sketchbook grade paper. I always speak about it being sketchbook grade because they actually have a reference that's called sketchbook, which is quite confusing. They should actually change that name. If you buy a Moleskine sketchbook, it doesn't solely refer to the fact that you're buying a sketchbook where you want to sketch in. They do have a reference that is called sketchbook. So if you buy that one, that is their sort of multimedia paper. And that's the thickest paper that you could get from them. Actually, I don't know if the watercolor paper they have is thicker. Maybe. But for a multimedia paper, this is actually pretty thick. And that's the one I've been using ever since I've been sketching. Honestly, props to James Jean. I think he single-handedly made that brand come to life again, rise like a phoenix, because he started working on Moleskine sketchbooks. I actually had no idea what that brand was until I saw James, working, like maybe 20 years ago on Moleskine sketchbooks. And his work was just out of this planet. What can you say about James Jean? Nothing that hasn't been said before. He deserves all the praise he gets. He is one of the most talented people that I have ever met in my life. I actually feel grateful for having met him and having kind of shared a little bit of my SVA years with him. He's that exceptional. It is incredible when you can actually share a little bit of time with a person that is just gifted. And aside from being gifted, he also puts the hours in. He works more hours than anyone I've ever met in my life. So every single accolade he has, he deserves. He was the one that actually, made me buy a Moleskine sketchbook. Before I used to be like, any paper will do. And honestly, any paper is good enough. Yesterday we were looking at those Francis Bacon paintings. And they are done in whatever paper. I mean, if there is somebody in art history who couldn't care less about materials, it is Bacon. I mean, yes, predominantly he painted in oils, but then he was using house paint, acrylic paint, he was mixing everything.
Bacon was just solely about expression, and he sacrificed everything for it. So the paper that he was using, it was very thin. It was just from a pad, from any pad. I am a firm believer that, let's say, if I can't get this paper, I'll yearn for it, I'll mourn it, but I'll find another alternative and I'll paint on it because that's just how things go. There's actually a paper that I want to try here in Bogota called Earth Pact. And I actually have to contact them and see if they can send me bigger sheets of that paper because I do think I can get a thicker grade of that paper. And I am very excited to see how I can paint on it. That plus, Moleskine has, particularly sketchbook Moleskines, the sketchbook grade. It has like a nice kind of creamy tint to it. It's not very saturated. It's actually pretty light, but it's very creamy. And for the longest time, I've wanted to paint on top of a toned paper. So yeah, you could consider like a cream color paper maybe having some sort of tone to it. But I've been wanting to work on something that has a little darker value to it. And this Earth Pact paper may be just the thing that I'm looking for. So I know it's quarantine and I know it's probably going to be hard, but I'm going to contact them to see if I can get some of that paper. And by the way, it's recycled paper. It's made from sugarcane, so the process is far, far more natural. And it's Colombian paper, so, local stuff. What can be better than that? I mean, again, props to Moleskine, but if I could do local stuff, then 100% I'll go for local stuff. I promise you that I'm going to do that. And I will speak about the results, or I will show you the results, or we can actually do this in tandem, and you guys can actually see me working on that paper, and we'll try to see, how it feels, and I'll compare it to other paper. But again, I think any paper will do. This is very important for me. I am 100% brand agnostic. You don't have to commit to any brand in particular. There's no reason in life to do that. But I also believe in saying, hey, this is good. And it actually works really, really well. And if it's a big company, I'll say, hey, it's a big company that does a really good product. And if it's a smaller company, like I've said with Pinkfinger, for example, in the UK, Pinkfinger does amazing watercolor and multimedia paper. If you want to support a bigger company, fine. If you want to support a smaller, more local company, that's absolutely awesome. But there are alternatives. We just have to look hard. We just have to put some effort into doing that. I am the same way about paint. A lot of people ask me about paint, like brand names of paint. I use Michael Harding, who makes exquisite, wonderful paint. I've used Rublev that make absolutely amazing paint. But I also use Winton paint, the quote-unquote student grade paint, which I absolutely abhor that they call it student grade. Oh, this is the artist grade paint, and this is the student grade paint. My God, stop it with that. That's the most terrible denomination for paint ever. I've met people that have not been students for over 30 years that are horrible artists. And it doesn't matter if they can buy artist paint, they're terrible. And I've met students that are 10,000 times the artist I'm ever going to be, and they are 17 or 18. So please don't do that. I mean, I totally understand that you want to make a more accessible brand of paint, and you want to make one that is of pure pigment. Great. That is totally understandable. The fact that you have options, that you have accessibility for people that, may have limited means, that is incredible. But don't call it artist and don't call it student. Because the message you're conveying is that if you can't buy artist paint, then perhaps you just don't have what it takes to be an artist. And that's not cool. That's not cool at all. Begrudgingly, I buy Winton paint, whatever they want to call it. I'll call it Winton. It actually has a name, which is the lower grade paint that Winsor Newton makes. And I use a ton of that because for cheaper pigments, let's say almost every earth tone, ultramarine blue, for example, which is a shame, right? Ultramarine blue is actually like a cheap pigment nowadays. It was used to replace lapis lazuli, which was one of the most sought after precious pigments in all of history. So, that's how the world turns. But those cheaper pigments I buy, in cheap brands. I can't really justify buying a very expensive pigment that is cheap to produce. If it is cheap to produce, just buy a cheap pigment. And I perfectly know that there's a difference even in cheaper pigments between the, higher grade and the lower grade. I know. But, the difference is not as big as, let's say, having to buy a cadmium red versus a cadmium red hue. Now, for those pigments that I want to have saturation, I actually buy the nice kind of loaded pigment. So I buy bismuth yellow, I buy cad red, and if I buy cobalt, I'll buy like a real cobalt blue. But for everything else, I'm totally fine with just having cheap pigments. So I'll have extraordinary pigments, I'll have artist grade, let's call it that, and I'll have student grade pigments. So I'll have all three. So in essence, that makes me, I don't know, Colombian, that makes me a mutt. So that is what I believe in. You paint with what you have, and that's it, period. Same thing with brushes. I buy whatever I can get, and that's about it. I know a lot of you are constantly asking about mediums and paints, and honestly, it is not dependent on any of this. It's just that paper is reminding me, is getting me closer to something that I want to strive for within my painting. Now, this doesn't mean that if I don't use paper, then I'm hindering myself. Then I'm actually not going to be able to get closer to the artist that I want to be. No, not at all. Not at all. If you take paper away, if you told me you can't paint on this raw moleskin sketchbook ever again, that doesn't mean that suddenly my artistic hopes crumbled and all my discoveries from this week are gone. Those disappear because the paper is gone. No, of course not. That's why I always say that the things that we learn, we can carry. Nobody can steal that away from us. You can steal my paper, you can steal my paints. A company can stop producing a color that I love or a brush that I love, or suddenly stores in Colombia are not importing brushes that I liked and I have to buy cheaper ones. It doesn't matter. None of that matters. None of it. The discoveries that I make are not dependent on any of these materials. None of them. None of them. Absolutely none of them. I would adjust in a second. In literally like a second to the new things that I would have to use. And I've been teaching myself not to yearn for those things that I lose. So yeah, right now I'm enjoying this paper. I'm enjoying these paints. I'm enjoying my brushes. If I have to use other paints, other substrates, other brushes, like I have in the past 20 some odd years of painting, because I haven't been painting in one thing for all this time. I've changed my palette. I've changed my brushes. I've changed my substrate. I've painted on the most beautiful linen you can ever buy. And I've painted on the most cheap piece of plastic that you can ever find on the street. And it's all been fine. It's all been perfectly fine. My point is, even though I've been very grateful to the act of painting on top of unprimed paper, and I've been super excited about seeing this painting kind of morph into this very clay-like surface that I really enjoy, where I'm sacrificing saturation, where I'm emphasizing the sculptural quality of paint, where I'm sacrificing my value scale. All those things are happening, and I love them. All those things are like, yes, those are the things that are in tune with the painter that I want to be, with the path that I've carved out for myself throughout this time. But those things are not beholden to anything. If I really think about it, if I think of, I really like the sculptural quality of paint, okay? If I really like the way I shorten my value scale and I diminish saturation, okay? All those things are possible regardless of the technique you choose to paint in. They're not tied to paper. It's just that this raw paper becomes an immediate reminder of something that I am highly sensitive to and that I am moved by and that I connect with in a very deep level. That's all it is. And yeah, it is a wonderful marriage of my intent and technique and then the product that is being produced through that painting practice that involves this raw paper. All those variables kind of work in tandem. But doesn't mean that if I change something up, then, oh my God, your painting is horrible now. You forgot how to paint. Oh, these results are completely different. Yeah, sure. I mean, I could do another painting that exhibits some sort of other variables, But it doesn't mean that I can't hold on to those things that I've really, really enjoyed throughout this week. So that is very important because I don't want people to get the idea that, oh, what are you using? Oh, that paper. Oh, crap. We have to get that paper in order to have that same experience. But if you don't have the same experience, it doesn't matter. Because maybe, and this has happened to every one of us, I've tried to replicate the experiences of painters that I love. Sometimes I've seen people paint and I'm like, oh my God, what colors are you using there? Because I've never painted that color in my life. And they'll be like, yeah, dude, this is King's Blue and raw sienna and whatever. It could be anything. Like an idiot, I just go and buy those paints. And then, I go home and I try to do some paints that try and imitate that experience that I just saw. And nothing. I get nothing. I just don't know how to understand it. Those people are able to connect with those paints because they have created this relationship. And sometimes it's a lifelong relationship with those paints, with those colors. Like they deeply understand those colors. They fundamentally have constructed a painting practice based on those color relationships. And it's not like you could just step in and say, hey, what are those brushes? Oh, what did you mix for that? Dark? And then you try to do that and you realize, no, it doesn't work. And sometimes we're pissed because we go like, hey, what's the surface you're using? And what's the brush? And you go and you spend like an idiot again, like hundreds of dollars on these beautiful pieces of linen that are glued to some gorgeous piece of wood and you buy these super expensive brushes and then you start to paint and you're the same painter that was trying to look for answers. It's just that now you were looking for them in a place where you weren't supposed to look for them and you're $200 short. That sometimes speaks about just our need to believe that the answer has to lie elsewhere, that it's not within us. It has to always be in a palette, in the brand of paints, in the brand of brushes, in the brand of paper, in the medium that somebody uses. It always has to be exogenous to our life. It always has to be, outside the realm of our universe because we kind of convince ourselves that within our universe, we're doing everything, every possible thing to get better. And we just can't rationally comprehend why we're not getting better or why it's tough for us when seemingly for everyone else it's easy. So we love to believe that the answer to this has to lie elsewhere. It has nothing to do with me. And I've always believed in the opposite. I've always believed in that the answer is in you, is in your life. It's in the things, the moments you choose to paint. It's in the way you recognize your intent. It's in the way you've worked hard at understanding the manner in which you perceive things and what has shaped that perception and why your perception is modeled in that way. I've always believed that those are the answers that we should always look for. And those have nothing to do with color or paint or paper or any other substrate or how expensive things are or how cheap things are. Nothing. That has to do with us. We are the most important part of that equation. I've had an awesome time working on this particular substrate. And I'll give props to it because I think it's good. That's why I'm not shy to say, hey, this paper's good. If this is a good product, hell yeah, I'll say it. It's a good product. And nobody's paying me to do that. We receive nothing. Like Dani and I, we firmly believe that this project has to remain commercial-free, ad-free, and we won't accept anything. No products from anyone, no money from anyone that, aside from the people that want to support us through buying our paintings, but we are not going to support anything. So whenever I say, oh my God, this paper sucks, it's because I feel it sucks. Or if I say, wow, this paper is actually really good, it's because I feel it's really good. But this is just my honest opinion. Today was a little bit different in the sense that, we were doing 4 portraits before. And today, well, it's in a sense, it's a portrait still. I mean, it's my hand. And if people were wondering, it's like, oh my God, you're really pushing saturation. Remember, I'm like a bootleg ginger. So I am, yes, Colombian, but my grandfather was German. For people that don't know, my grandfather moved to Colombia in 1930, and he was an artist. That's the reason my mother became an artist. And I'm positive that the reason I became an artist was the fact that my mother is an artist. So I'm very grateful to have that in my family. But of course, I have this European gene where I am, very, very fair. I am of the pinkish hue. So people that maybe share my skin type know that we are prone to changing colors, particularly going to a redder hue with just about anything. If we just say no and we nod very firmly, the nodding can actually cause flushing. If we do a handstand, which I can't do, so that's a terrible example, that's like 4 days of being flushed. If I get nervous, my ears actually feel like all the blood in my body has gone to my ears. That's how it works. I'm sorry, but I can't do anything about that. And my hands, this is the cool part, and we're landing on today's painting. Whenever I clean my brushes, whenever I'm washing the dishes, I use like scalding hot water. I mean, this is lava. I'm sure that if you drop me into a volcano, by the way, this is the way I want to go. If you drop me into a volcano, I am unharmed. I am untouched. It would be me and Daenerys. I know it. I am 100% sure because I can put my hand under just like scalding water. It could be boiling. I'm sure I could just take pasta off the boiling water and nothing would happen. When I wash the dishes, it's like crazy hot water. What happens is that, my hands are probably burning. And the way they manifest that they are in pain, but I don't feel it, is that my fingers turned that red, that purple red. This was actually a picture I took after I was washing my brushes. So this is what my hand looks like. Again, this only happens to very bootleg, fair-skinned people like me. This only happens in my village. So if you guys can't relate to any of this, we understand. This is only us. So don't worry. Don't feel left out. It's a very sexy condition. So all those purples, greens, red, violets, orange, reds, I think all of those are in my skin tone. And they show up. And the fact that I see them, if I showed you a picture, you would be like, oh my God, it's not that bad. But in my perception, it is like I am a chameleon and I can change to those colors. So if I sense that saturation is there, I'm going to push it. I'm going to so push it. And this week, we are kind of using the same palette that I used last week for the spoken paintings. So I'm using titanium white, which I'm running out of, and I'm very nervous. I'm using bismuth yellow, cad red, alizarin, which I'm about to replace with a weird quinacridone magenta or something like that. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to tell you guys how it goes. But alizarin crimson. Then I'm using raw umber, and for my blue, I'm not using cobalt because I ran out of that one. So I'm using ultramarine, just Old Faithful, ultramarine, Winton, ultramarine blue. So I have saturation, really high saturation, and I can do quite a temperature shift with that palette. I have saturation with my yellow, with my cat red, also with alizarin too. That's quite a rich color. And even though ultramarine blue, the blue violet, is not super saturated because it is a cheaper blue, it does give me a chance to speak about coolness. So I have, in many ways, I have a crazy ass warm color with my cat red, a lemon-ish yellow with my bismuth yellow. So you could call that one a cooler yellow, although I don't feel it's as cool as lemon yellow. And then two insanely cool colors, well, actually three, that are titanium white, alizarin crimson, and ultramarine blue. And then raw umber, which is my natural earth tone that's very, very neutral. That's why I love it. So to me, it's a beautiful palette. It can make me go very gray if I want. So I'll do it raw umber dominant. Or I'll just mix a ton of complementary colors and I can gray them out that way. Or I can have a ton of saturation. Wonderful palette. I think I'm going to be using it for next week too. But we'll see. The only reason I wouldn't use it is because I'm running out of color. So, but I'll let you guys know. That was it for this week. Like we always do, Dani and I thank you for letting us be your company. We take your time and your company very seriously and we try to respect it. So thank you very much. And remember, next week, we're going to do a new theme. I thought in the beginning of the week, I thought that we could do another "you're not supposed to" week and just concentrate on the things, quote unquote, you're not supposed to do and just kind of challenge that. But instead of challenging something that people tell you not to do, let's try and, see it from another shore, and let's just say we're going to push stuff. Because today's painting taught me, and remember, this is the cool thing, to be able to link the 2 weeks. So the painting today taught me that, hell yeah, I love pushing stuff. I loved pushing all those changes in hues and saturation today. And I thought, well, let's push stuff next week. What does it mean to push something? And how far can we push something? And that's what we're going to explore next week. So I'll see you guys next week. Thank you guys for hanging out today. Thank you. Bye.